This happened about 20 years ago when I was in my late 20s. I'd grown up in the Chicago suburbs, in a family that valued hard work and respect for others' property. My parents had saved for years to buy two apartment buildings, each with 3 units. We lived in two of them and rented out the rest. Our buildings were on a street lined with similar 3 unit apartments for about a mile. Most didn't have much parking, but we were lucky. Since we lived there, we had extra land and could fit about 16 cars in our lot. It was great for our tenants and us. For years, everything was fine. We had good relationships with our tenants, and the parking situation was never an issue. But then, one day, I noticed unfamiliar cars starting to show up in our lot. At first, I thought it was just a one-time thing, maybe someone visiting a tenant, but it kept happening. One day, I'd had enough. I blocked in one of these random cars, thinking I'd have a word with the driver when they came back. This jerk actually drove through our bushes and across the yard to get out. I was furious. I called the cops, but they said there wasn't much they could do. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. I called a tow company and had them put up signs warning that unauthorized vehicles would be towed. For a while, that seemed to do the trick. No more random cars. But then came New Year's Eve. I got home from work, ready to relax and celebrate, when I saw our entire parking lot was full. There were even cars on the street blocking in the other cars. I called the tow company, but they were swamped and couldn't come for hours. Now, you have to understand, it was freezing out. Below zero, typical Chicago winter. As I stood there shivering and fuming, an idea hit me. A wicked, delicious idea. I went to the garage and dug out our lawn sprinklers and hoses. I connected one hose to the hot water faucet in the laundry room so it wouldn't freeze up. Then I set up 3 sprinklers and got to work. For the next 5 hours, I moved those sprinklers every half hour or so, making sure to cover every single car and every inch of the parking lot. I paid special attention to the locks, the spaces between the windows and the seals, and even the grills. By the time I was done, everything was encased in a thick layer of ice. Satisfied with my work, I put away the sprinklers and hoses and went to bed. But my night wasn't over yet. At 4 a.m., I was woken up by furious pounding on our doors and non-stop doorbell ringing. I smiled to myself and called the cops. When they arrived, I finally went outside to face the music. The scene was chaotic. Angry people were yelling and gesturing as at their frozen cars. Some were crying, others were threatening to sue. The cops were trying hard not to laugh. One of the car owners approached me, red-faced and shouting. He demanded to know what I had done to their cars. I calmly explained that I hadn't done anything to their cars, pointing out that this was private property and they were all trespassing. The angry car owners sputtered that their friend had told them they could park here, claiming he owned an apartment nearby. I retorted that their friend had lied, emphasizing that this was our property and the signs clearly said that unauthorized vehicles would be towed. I pointed to the tow signs, which were clearly visible despite the ice. The cops backed me up, explaining that they could ticket on private property with the owner's permission. One of the officers then informed the group that they would all be getting tickets and their cars would be towed. He added that there was nothing they could do about the ice damage. The entitled parkers were livid, but there was nothing they could do. Later, I found out that the friend who told them to park here was the same idiot who had driven over our bushes months ago. Turns out, he'd been charging people to park in our lot during his New Year's party. Well, I bet he had some explaining to do to his guests. Not only did these entitled people have to pay for towing and tickets, but they also had to deal with the damage the ice had done to their cars. Some of them couldn't even open their doors for days. This is actually my mom's story, but it involves me when I was just a baby. She told me about it recently because my husband and I are expecting our first child, and she wanted to prepare me for the crazy situations parents sometimes face. So, a bit about me and my family. My mom is Filipino, but she was raised in California. You wouldn't know it from talking to her. She doesn't have an accent or anything. My dad, on the other hand, is as white as they come. I ended up taking after him in the looks department. I'm pale as can be and don't look Asian at all. This has led to some interesting situations over the years. Anyway, this particular incident happened when I was about 5 months old. My parents had taken me to the mall for some shopping. I was tucked away in my stroller, probably drooling or doing whatever it is babies do. At some point, my dad needed to use the restroom, so my mom decided to sit down and wait for him. That's when this lady, let's call her Karen, approached us. At first, she seemed friendly enough. Karen asked how old I was, commenting on how cute I looked. My mom replied, telling her I was 5 months old. Karen then looked at my mom, and that's when things started to go downhill. She asked if my mom was the nanny. My mom tried to correct her, but Karen interrupted, assuming she must be the babysitter. My mom was in shock at this point, but she tried again. She explained that she was actually my mother and had given birth to me. Karen, still not believing her, pointed out that I didn't look like my mom at all. My mom tried to explain that I took after my father in appearance. Karen, however, wasn't having any of it. She accused my mom of kidnapping me, saying it didn't make sense that I didn't look like her and that my father wasn't around. My mom was terrified at this point, especially when Karen tried to take me out of the stroller. My mom protested, telling Karen that I was her baby. But Karen insisted she was going to find my real parents. Just then, my dad came back from the restroom and saw what was happening. He ran over to us, demanding to know what Karen was doing and telling her to let go of the stroller. Karen looked at him, then at me, and you could see the wheels turning in her head as she realized I looked just like my dad. She mumbled something about how I did look like my father after all, and then just said never mind, and left. And just like that, she walked away. No apology, no nothing. She just left as if she hadn't just accused my mom of kidnapping and tried to take me away. My parents were shaken up to say the least. They reported the incident to mall security and the police for attempted kidnapping. We haven't heard back from the police yet, but I'll update if we do. The whole thing is just mind-boggling to me. The audacity of some people to assume they know everything about a family based on a quick look, and to think they have the right to intervene based on those assumptions, it's crazy. I'm just glad my dad showed up when he did. Who knows what might have happened if he hadn't? It's a scary thought, but it's also a reminder of how important it is to look out for each other, especially in public places where you never know what kind of people you might encounter. So that's my story, or rather, my family's story. It's not the kind of thing you expect to happen on a regular trip to the mall, but I guess it goes to show that entitlement and prejudice can rear their ugly heads anywhere, anytime. At least now I know to be prepared for anything when my own little one arrives. When I arrived at college as a wide-eyed freshman ready to tackle my biochemistry major and make new friends, our dorm leader seemed cool at first. He was this laid-back upperclassman who told us he'd stay out of our business if we stayed out of his. He even bragged about how much he drank during his freshman year, hinting that he wouldn't care if we had alcohol in our rooms as long as we kept it quiet. Fast forward to the end of October. I just finished the toughest week of my life, with 3 brutal exams back-to-back. To unwind, a guy down the hall invited me to watch an NBA game in his room. There were just 3 of us, chilling and watching the Lakers on a Thursday night. My new friend offered me some vodka. Being a naive freshman trying to fit in, I took 1 shot. Just 1. That's when things went sideways. One of the guys spilled some soda and went to grab paper towels. As he left, our dorm leader walked by and spotted the vodka. He laughed and made a comment about remembering his freshman days, telling us to keep it down. 30 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. 2 police officers with breathalyzers. Apparently, our dorm leader had complained about underage drinking and a party in our room. A party. It was just 3 guys watching basketball. I ended up with a minor in consumption charge, community service, and a meeting with the college's Judicial Affairs Center about my drinking problem. All because of 1 shot. Weeks later, I confronted our dorm leader. I asked him why he ratted us out and why he didn't just tell us to go back to our rooms if he had a problem. His response was cold. He told me that I had made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision. After that, I moved off campus and joined a fraternity. I thought I was done with that hypocrite, but nope. In my sophomore year, he texted me about a freshman pledging our fraternity. He informed me that one of the guys pledging had been caught dealing alcohol to another freshman in the dorms. Turns out he'd reported another kid for giving someone a bottle of wine. This poor freshman got a minor in possession charge and had to face judicial affairs too. But here's where it gets good. In his meeting with Judicial Affairs, the freshman mentioned that our former dorm leader had texted me about his charges. Apparently, that's a huge no-no. The Judicial Affairs guy said if we could prove it, our ex-dorm leader would be in serious trouble. So I sent them the text. Sweet, sweet karma. I didn't hear anything for a while, but near the end of the year, I ran into our ex-dorm leader at the dining hall. He came up to me with this whole sob story. He admitted that he knew I had reported him to Judicial Affairs. He told me about how he got fired from his position and lost his scholarship money. He complained about how horrible his life had been since then. He questioned why I did it and suggested that the situation could have been handled differently, without him losing his job and scholarship. I looked him dead in the eye for a good 30 seconds before responding. I threw his own words back at him, telling him that he had made a decision and had to suffer the consequences of that decision. It was like watching someone bite into a lemon, thinking it was an orange. He just stood there, mouth open, as I walked away. I'm not usually one for revenge, but man, that felt good. It's funny how life has a way of coming full circle. He thought he could play judge, jury, and executioner with us freshmen, but in the end, he got a taste of his own medicine. I finished my biochemistry degree without any more run-ins with power-tripping dorm leaders. And whenever I think about having a drink now, I always remember to keep it off campus. Some lessons stick with you for life, I guess. Let me take you back to when I was just a 22-year-old IT whiz, fresh out of college and eager to prove myself. I landed a job at this manufacturing company right after graduation. They were expanding rapidly, opening new factories left and right. Being the new guy, I was always looking for ways to stand out. So when the opportunity came up to travel to these new sites for installations and troubleshooting, I jumped at the chance. My colleagues, mostly older guys with families, were more than happy to let me take these trips. For them, the early morning flights and long days were a hassle. But for me, it was an adventure, not to mention the sweet overtime pay. At first, my girlfriend would drop me off at the airport. It was only a short drive from our place, and she was an early riser anyway. But then, a coworker pointed out something I'd been missing. My coworker asked me if I was claiming my mileage to the airport. When I said I wasn't, he told me it was a legitimate expense and that every little bit counts. So I decided to claim it on my next expense report. It wasn't much, just a couple quid each way, but hey, why not? That's when I had my first run-in with my boss. My boss told me he was rejecting my mileage claim. When I asked why, he explained that if my girlfriend was driving me and I was claiming mileage, it meant she was using the car for hire or reward, which he couldn't allow. Now, I later found out this wasn't true, but at the time, I didn't want to argue. So for my next trip, I booked a local minicab. The cost went up from £2 each way to £10 for the morning ride and £7 for the return. I thought this would solve the problem, but my boss had other ideas. He told me I shouldn't be claiming for this and that we had an account with the airport transfer service. He said he'd let it slide this time, but next time I should book with the right company. Confused, I went to our department secretary for clarification. I showed her my boss's email and she explained the situation. The secretary informed me with a hint of amusement that the airport transfer service my boss was referring to was actually a luxury limousine company meant for executives. When I asked if she was kidding, she confirmed she wasn't, but suggested we do what the boss wanted. So for my next trip, I did exactly as I was told. And let me tell you, it was something else. At 5:30 a.m., a sleek BMW 760IL pulled up outside my modest house. The driver, decked out in a full chauffeur's uniform complete with a hat, got out and opened the door for me. The driver greeted me politely and offered to take my luggage. I awkwardly agreed, feeling out of place. I climbed into the back seat, feeling completely out of place in my work clothes and steel-toe boots. The driver then asked if the temperature was to my liking and if I wanted any music. I declined, feeling overwhelmed by the luxury. The ride to the airport was surreal. I half expected him to offer me champagne and caviar. That evening, when I landed, there he was again, holding a sign with my name and company. He walked me to the car parked in the expensive short-stay lot. Here I was, covered in dust from a day's work, being chauffeured in a luxury car. The next day, I overheard our secretary talking to my boss. The secretary informed my boss about the cost of the airport transfers for me, revealing that they cost £120 each day. My boss was shocked and called it ridiculous. When the secretary reminded him that he had insisted on using the company account, he declared it unacceptable and said we needed a new policy, allowing me to use local minicabs from then on. From then on, I was allowed to book reasonable transportation without any fuss. And on days when we had heavy equipment, the boss even let us expense fuel for our own cars.